Welcome back to Wrestling Talk. I am your host, Alexis Carrillo, and it's great to be back on the YouTube channel discussing what we all love to watch, which is professional wrestling on this Friday, April the 22nd. We have a lot to look forward to this weekend with Rampage and SmackDown later tonight and tomorrow's Impact Wrestling pay-per-view in Rebellion. But right now, we are going to start off the show talking about a truly, for once, huge announcement by Tony Khan. And I'm not saying his past huge announcements haven't been up to par. I mean, I think the only one that has been up to par with this announcment is when he came out at the start of Dynamite and announced that he had purchased Ring of Honor Wrestling. But basically, All Elite Wrestling and AEW announced via press release and on their show on Dynamite that this summer, June 26th is the exact date, Chicago, Illinois, the exact location, AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling will be holding and putting together a pay-per-view card, a super card for the ages. Something that most wrestling fans out there have been dreaming about, have been wanting for it to crystallize and just become a thing. It is finally happening. And of course, you gotta insert that perfect drip and drop of marketing, rather, in the fact that this pay-per-view event is going to be called the Forbidden Door. Something that Tony Khan pretty much put out there, almost 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, ever since AEW was founded and started collaborating with all of these different wrestling promotions. And without a shadow of a doubt, AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, even though they haven't worked that much in the past, they've had some talent exchange, specifically on the Japan Pro Wrestling's part, bringing them to AEW. They've always been linked ever since AEW was founded in January 1st of 2019. Most of the stars that are currently in AEW that are American or Canadian or have any kind of North American wrestling experience currently in the IWC's limelight is the fact that they previously worked New Japan Pro Wrestling shows. We're talking about Kenny Omega, we're talking about Chris Jericho, we're talking about the Young Bucks, and so many more that have worked out there in Japan. So now, on June 26th, a lot of pro wrestling fans are going to be just biding their time, biting their lips, and trying to get tickets and trying to purchase the pay-per-view. And can we talk about the fact that this is going to be held in Chicago, Illinois, one of the best, hottest, smartest wrestling crowds out there. I mean, it doesn't get any better or bigger than this for this type of pay-per-view event. So, it'd be foolish of anyone out there to think that this is not going to be a complete sellout. And depending on the card that they provide us with, let's see if they give us a few dream matches, the pay-per-view buys may go through the roof. Now, with that being said, it is roughly a month after the AEW Double or Nothing pay-per-view. So, are all of the wrestling fans and pro wrestling fans willing to shell out $55 to $60 in May and $55 to $60 in June to watch both of these supercards, both of these pay-per-view extravaganzas that AEW is about to pull out? And the answer to that is a very, very simple and resounding yes. Because there is no way that any hardcore wrestling fan out there is going to miss this type of event. Like I said, this is a pay-per-view event. This is the type of event that wrestling fans out there have been yearning for years. Ever since AEW was announced, ever since AEW started to accumulate all these different stars. I mean, Jon Moxley was IWGP United States Champion, and he brought the championship over to AEW. He defended the championship on Dynamite, I believe. And he has history with some of the top stars in AEW. You got to talk about the Switchblade in Jay White. We got several former members of the Bullet Club now in AEW. We've got the North American part of the Bullet Club currently working Impact Wrestling, but it doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much to bring them into this show and incorporate them into this forbidden door. And who knows, maybe we get some Impact Wrestling stars, maybe we get some Ring of Honor Wrestling stars on that card as well. You got the Good Brothers in Impact Wrestling, you got Jonathan Gresham, you got the Briscoes, you got all these stars who can make quite a big impact on this show. But like I said, it's one show, one night, 3 to 4 hours of some of the best wrestling that the business and the industry can currently offer outside of the WWE. With that said, there's only 7 to 8 matches, and I doubt that AEW is going to try to incorporate any kind of storylines into these matches. I'd be surprised if they do. I'd be thrilled, and I'd be glued to my screen if after Double or Nothing, doesn't matter the results, doesn't matter who walks out champions out of that pay-per-view, if the Wednesday night after that pay-per-view we start getting Okada appear and Ibushi appear, then this pay-per-view itself is set. So with that said, what do you think about this Forbidden Door pay-per-view? What do you think about the fact that they're working together finally? And are you willing to shell out that money to witness this pay-per-view live via streaming, via pay-per-view, or are you even planning to buy these tickets as soon as they go on sale at the beginning of May and head out to Chicago and enjoy this live wrestling fan experience? Leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the comment section below. And with that said, let's talk about AEW as well, because just like with New Japan Pro Wrestling, AEW is about to incorporate some of the most traditional ideas, not only in wrestling, but in sports in general. And I am a sports fan. I'm mostly a soccer fan. And wrestling fans out there, for the most part, more or less, are also sports fans. So when you incorporate something from sports into sports entertainment, into professional wrestling, like AEW has with the win-loss record that they have kept doing, and the rankings that they have kept doing since their inception, then that just makes AEW fans and wrestling fans in general feel more attached to the product, feel more attached to whoever the wrestler who's on top or whoever the wrestler they're supporting has in terms of record. But now, we're going to have ourselves the Owen Hart Cup. Both the women's and the men's are going to have their own tournament, with the conclusion being at Double or Nothing. The finals are going to be set for that pay-per-view in May, I believe, in Vegas. So as a sports fan, as a soccer fan, I could not be more thrilled that we're going to get all these tournaments. Well, not all these. 2 tournament-style professional wrestling. That's something different, something that WWE doesn't really offer, something that nobody else really can fathom. And with the talent, like I said, AEW currently has, in my mind and in my view, a bloated talent roster where they can rarely and scarcely provide any kind of spotlight into most of these wrestlers that aren't in any current active storylines. I'm talking about Brian Cage. I'm talking about Kyle O'Reilly, who's pretty much in the background of anything that Adam Cole and the Bucks do. Kyle O'Reilly recently qualified for this tournament as well, so that's something to bring up. But overall, like, you got guys like Jay Lethal. You brought in Jay Lethal for a reason. You have him on the roster. You got Keith Lee. You got Jonathan Gresham, who has reportedly signed with AEW. He's the current Ring of Honor World Champion. And you can't really give him too much in AEW right now because there's not enough TV time allocated for each of these stars. Jonathan Gresham right now is going to have a non-title match at Impact Wrestling's Rebellion pay-per-view event in New York. After that, we'll see him more prominently on AEW. I have no doubt about that. And then Ring of Honor Wrestling has to build up their own roster. But overall, these tournaments that AEW is planning, they are going to bring in my view, and like I said, I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But tournaments are meant to bring spotlight to all of these wrestlers, not only just for the winner, but whoever gets to the quarterfinals or the semifinals. They're just this close to winning the tournament itself, and then they end up falling short. But hey, that still puts these guys over. And I've said this in the past, you don't need to win a match. You don't need to win a championship. You don't need to win any type of contest, any type of opportunity, anything at all to get over with the crowd. You can lose. You could have a losing effort in the quarterfinals or in the or in the first round. You can lose a title match and still get over with the crowd because of the performance you put, because of the story that you told in that ring. And that's something that these tournaments, the Owen Hart Cup, both on the women's and on the men's side, can do. Not to mention that it's going to build up credibility for whoever is in these tournaments. It really is. I mean, Red Velvet has some kind of a past in AEW, but she hasn't been really prominently featured. How about she just shows up at this Owen Hart Cup tournament and makes a run to the semifinals? You think that won't get her over with the crowd? You think that won't make the crowd want to see more of her? I certainly do. And that is the beauty of tournaments, not just in professional wrestling, but everywhere in sports itself. But again, those are just my thoughts. Do you think I'm delusional? Do you think something else is going to happen? Are you excited for these tournaments? As you should be, in my opinion. Leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on what might happen for these tournaments in the coming weeks in the comment section below. Now we gotta talk about what transpired on Monday Night Raw. And on Monday Night Raw, a brand new United States champion was crowned. The former Austin, now just Theory, defeated Finn Balor to become United States champion. And he had a celebration of sorts in the middle of the ring, and then he walked to the ramp and was met at the ramp by the chairman himself, Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon himself. And then he took a selfie with the championship and the chairman himself. So it's safe to say that the chairman himself and everyone who has any say in WWE is very, very high on Theory. I mean, they're naming him Vince McMahon's protege on WWE television. And trust me, that's not something to sneeze at. That's not something that is going to be the end of your career. As a matter of fact, it's actually set to help you. Because if I am correct, the very first guy that the evil Mr. McMahon character ever got behind was Mankind, was Mick Foley, back in 1998. And we all know how that ended. He ended up betraying Mankind and signing with The Rock. But overall, having Mr. McMahon, that character, side with Mankind, put that character of Mankind over the edge and made him a WWE Championship contender. Not to mention, he made The Rock into the corporate champion. The Rock was already over. He became an even better heel with Mr. McMahon. And then when he turned on the corporation, when he turned on Mr. McMahon, he pretty much established himself as the as the people's champion. And the rest, as they say, is history. Now, I'm not saying that Austin Theory, or Theory rather, as they're trying to call him right now, is going to be anywhere on the level of a Mankind or of The Rock at some point in his career. I'm just saying that if Vince McMahon gets behind you, there are varying results, but overall, you get over with the crowd. Overall, the crowd pays attention. It happened with Mr. Kennedy. It happened with Drew McIntyre when he first debuted on SmackDown. And Theory, not to mention, nothing against the guy, of course. I've talked about Mr. McMahon ad nauseum right now, but Austin Theory is a hell of an athlete. He has the look. He has the charisma. On terms of promo and mic skills, he might be lacking a bit there. I think he has what it takes to improve on that. But right now, as of this moment, it's going to take him a while to switch off from that. There's not that much of a connection between Theory and Vince McMahon in terms of promo-wise yet. But overall, can Theory get over by having Mr. McMahon himself, the chairman, in his corner? And that is an absolutely. Because the guy can go in the ring. And not to mention, WWE has been trying to position Theory in a prominent part on Raw or on WWE TV for a long time. He was a part of Andrade's stable back on Monday Night Raw during the beginning of the pandemic era. That didn't work. Then he was brought into The Way with Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell in NXT. That worked wonders for him. He wasn't the main character. He was a side character, supportive role to the main Johnny Gargano, and he played his part right, and he got over with the NXT crowd. Now he's brought into WWE, and he's got Vince McMahon's blessing to be the next top star in WWE. Do I think that's going to happen anytime soon? No. But winning the United States Championship this past Monday Night Raw is a step in the right direction, because like I said, it brings and it places a spotlight on a man like Theory who can go in the ring. But here's the question I pose to you, WWE fans and wrestling fans out there. Do you think that 5 years from now, maybe not even 5 years from now, 2 years from now, Theory is going to be a main player in WWE? Because reports are saying that Vince sees him as the next face of the company. I'm just saying. So with that said, leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the comment section below. And speaking about faces of the company, we've got to talk about a man, a professional wrestler, a legend killer, who recently had his wrestling birthday. Randy Keith Orton, RKO, is now 20 years in the business, ever since he made his debut back in 2002 in that backstage segment with, I believe, Stacy Keibler and the chairman, speaking of the chairman, Mr. McMahon. And then he had a match against Hardcore Holly. And guess what? He won that match. And Randy Orton has gone through ups and downs throughout his career. I mean, there are so many backstage stories. There are so many people out there, so many wrestlers, former wrestlers, current wrestlers, that have mentioned that in his earlier years, Randy Orton was a grade A asshole. He got on your nerves. He made it a point to get on your nerves. He had backstage heat all over the place in WWE. And yes, he was a part of Evolution. Triple H saw something different in Randy Orton. He saw talent. He saw a second-generation superstar in Randy Orton. And he put his trust on him. But that was a 22, 23-year-old kid. At 24, he became the youngest world heavyweight champion in WWE history by defeating Chris Benoit at SummerSlam for the World Championship. If WWE didn't see anything in him, if you think WWE didn't see anything in him, I mean, then you were just blind, because he was Intercontinental Champion. He was clearly the number 2 guy in Evolution at that time. And then The Undertaker himself wanted Randy Orton to end the streak at WrestleMania 21 in 2005. And Randy Orton, like I said, like everyone said, he was a dick. He was an asshole back then. But even him, and as immature as he was at 24, 25 back then, he did not want to end that streak at WrestleMania. He respected The Undertaker and the business too much to do so, and he didn't. And then throughout the rest of 2005, he had the feud of his life, the rivalry of his life. That rivalry holds a special place in my wrestling heart, and my heart itself, because that rivalry got me attached to professional wrestling. I was a fan of Rey Mysterio. I was a fan of John Cena. I was a fan of Latino Heat, Eddie Guerrero, and Batista. That was all good. But seeing the bad guy that Randy Orton was, the dick, and then having The Undertaker with his theatrics, everything that happened on SmackDown during that entire tenure, that, I think, made me a professional wrestling fan through and through for the rest of my life. And in 2007, he got backstage heat. I think he failed WWE's wellness policy, I believe. And he got suspended. And I believe the only reason he wasn't fired was because, well, his last name. And I firmly believe that if John Cena hadn't gotten injured at the tail end of 2007, that Randy Orton would not have become WWE Champion anytime soon. But circumstances played into that fact, and WWE needed somebody to step up. And they needed a bad guy to step up, because Triple H was the babyface. And Shawn Michaels didn't want to be a bad guy, and Shawn Michaels didn't want to be world champion, so there you go. You had Randy Orton, as immature as possible, become WWE Champion. And then 2009, Randy Orton, my God, that guy was money. 2009, Randy Orton. You want to talk about 2005? 2009, Randy Orton. Everybody knew Randy Orton was the biggest heel in professional wrestling. And nobody debated it. Nobody. Nobody cared if they thought somebody else was a bigger heel than Randy Orton. He had a legacy. He had the look. He had the wrestling acumen to get over and become WWE Champion. And now what he's doing with RK Bro, the wrestling experience acquired, the wrestling savvy, he's doing everything in his power to get this feud, his rivalry, his opponent, and his partner Riddle over, because he damn well knows he doesn't need to get over. He's already right there. But with that said, Randy Orton is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's currently about to be 42 years old, I believe. The guy's in the best shape of his life. And he's putting on matches, like I said, like he hasn't in the past. So hopefully, if it's up to me, and if he keeps his momentum and his body and his career going, I wouldn't mind seeing him retire until 2030. I mean, he's just that damn good. And he's always been synonymous to the wrestling business, to the wrestling industry, no matter what. But with that said, what are your favorite wrestling memories? Because I know there's a lot of fans out there that love Randy Orton, and I doubt that there's any wrestling fans out there that hate Randy Orton or dislike Randy Orton, the person, the man, the wrestler, the performer. So with that said, what is your favorite memory? What's your favorite match so far in Randy Orton's career? What do you think he's doing? What do you think of the work he's doing currently with Riddle on WWE TV? Do you think he might be a main event player and a perfect challenger for the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns in the very near future? Leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions in the comments section below. And with that said, this Saturday night in Poughkeepsie, New York, Impact Wrestling gets to put on one hell of another card, because it is time for Rebellion. We've got 7 matches set up for the pay-per-view itself. We've got 2 matches on the pre-show card. And speaking of the pre-show card, it is truly an injustice that we have 2 championship matches on the pre-show card. 2 matches that, again, are for titles and aren't a part of the pay-per-view itself. we've got the Knockouts World Tag Team Championships on the line with the Influence faces off against the Inspiration. And this is a match that has been run back, I believe, a couple of times at past specials, at past Impact Wrestling TV specials or episodes. So it's not that much of an injustice to have it on the pre-show. But like I said, the Influence are defending their titles, and I truly believe that they are about to lose the titles to the Inspiration. That's my prediction right now, because Cassie Lee and Jessica McKay, they need the pedigree. They need to still be on the spotlight, and they need those tag titles for them to do so. And Madison Rayne and Tenille Dashwood, they'll do just fine being challengers and chasing the champions. That's just my point of view. And then we got ourselves a three-way match for the Impact X Division Championship. Now, here is my injustice in my point of view. Because the X Division Championship, to be defended in a three-way match with these three men in the pre-show, is an injustice. Not quite on the level of the WWE's mid-card titles not being defended or not being featured at WrestleMania. But again, the X Division Championship is Impact Wrestling's longest tenured championship. One could argue one of the most, if not the most prestigious championship in Impact Wrestling. So when Trey Miguel laces up his boots and defends his championship against Ace Austin and Mike Bailey in that three-way match at Rebellion during the pre-show, I'm going to be watching and be a little bit pissed off because it's not a part of the actual pay-per-view card. Now, who do I think walks out with the championship? Frankly, I wouldn't be pissed if any of these three men walked out with the title. I wouldn't. But I just have Trey Miguel retain because, like I said, it's a pre-show. So if you give it to Ace Austin or if you give it to Mike Bailey, what headlines does that cause other than the fact that, oh, I won the title at Rebellion pre-show? Very few people saw because it was a pre-show. So Trey Miguel, in my mind, retains his championship in a banger of a match that should have opened Rebellion pay-per-view. And instead, we're getting ourselves a three-way match that isn't for the championship, but it's nothing against these three competitors because they all can go in the ring. We're talking about the most notorious X Division champion in Chris Sabin, facing off against the Switchblade himself, Jay White, and facing off against a man who has caused quite an impact, no pun intended, in Steve Maclin. These three men can go. So this three-way match is going to be very entertaining. There's no doubt about that. But if you want to put this three-way match above the X Division Championship three-way match, missed opportunity right there. So with that said, who wins this match? Now, I wouldn't give it to Chris Sabin because, again, he doesn't need to win. He has enough of a pedigree and enough accolades to be able to take the loss and not be affected by it. I wouldn't give it to Jay White because he's made appearances with AEW. He's made appearances with New Japan Pro Wrestling. For all we know, he might be a part of the Forbidden Door pay-per-view as a part of either one of those companies. How does that benefit Impact if Jay White wins this Saturday night at Rebellion and then he just takes off? And then you got a man like Steve Maclin, who has the luck and the wrestling ability to be a top contender, not just for the X Division Championship, but also for the Impact World Championship. So I'd give it to Steve Maclin. I think that's a no-brainer. I think if there's any other result other than Steve Maclin winning this three-way match, that would be a huge mistake on Impact Wrestling's part. We're talking about Jonah versus Tomohiro Ishii. All I've got to say about it, it's going to be a hard-hitting match. Big ground and pound everything to do it. It's going to cause people to gasp. It's going to cause people to ooh and yeah, and this is awesome. I have no doubt about that. Who's going to come out with the win? No doubt about that either. It's going to be Jonah. He's a part of the current Impact Wrestling roster, and he needs to get over. Not to mention, he's already faced the former Impact World Champion Josh Alexander, so he's on the road to building momentum and becoming a top star in Impact Wrestling. How do you do that? Beat the living crap out of Tomohiro Ishii, who everyone knows can take a damn beating. Let's just find out what kind of a beating he takes in Poughkeepsie, New York. We got ourselves a non-title match in Jonathan Gresham against Eddie Edwards. Jonathan Gresham, who ever since he made an appearance in Impact Wrestling, has been against Honor No More. And that has set him on a path against Eddie Edwards, a former Ring of Honor World Champion in his own right, a former Impact World Champion, a man who used to be called the heartbeat, the heart of Impact Wrestling, in Eddie Edwards, and then he turned on the company that he's been a part of for the past 8 years to join Honor No More. So the story right there writes itself. Now, Jonathan Gresham, I've said this in the past, he's a fantastic wrestler. There's no doubt about that. That's why he is the undisputed Ring of Honor World Champion. But his style of professional wrestling is not my cup of tea, to put it that way. Yes, it's more technical, it's more slow-paced, it's more ground and pound, it's more analytical. It's just not something that I'm into. I'm into it in parts because I believe that you do have to slow down a match for it to work out and for the audience to digest whatever is going on in that match. But he does it far too much, far too recurring. And I'm just not really into that. Now, who wins this match? Again, the same case with Jay White in a triple threat match. Eddie Edwards has to win this match. Again, it's a non-title match for a reason. If it was a championship match for the Ring of Honor World title, Gresham wins, no doubt. But Eddie Edwards is the one sticking around with Impact Wrestling in the very, very, very near future, and he needs to win. Especially since I believe we're going to have ourselves a brand new world champion out of this pay-per-view event. We've got to talk about the Knockouts World Championship. Tasha Steelz defending against Rosemary. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. When I found out that Tasha Steelz, and yes, I did find out, I haven't been able to keep up with the Impact Wrestling product in a long time, and I'm sorry. I'm being completely honest with you, but again, I will get back to it. I have no doubt about that. But when I found out that Tasha Steelz was the brand new Knockouts World Champion, it raised a big, gigantic question mark in my brain. Not because Tasha Steelz isn't talented, not because I just couldn't believe it. It's just, it came out of nowhere in my mind. Tasha Steelz, in my view, hadn't been built up enough as a singles competitor to beat a Knockouts World Champion yet. And yet she beat Mickie James to become the world champion. And now she faces off against Rosemary, someone who Impact Wrestling has mismanaged and misused ever since she returned from her injury. Because Rosemary was Knockouts World Champion, she lost the title and then she got injured. And when she came back from injury, I fully believed that Rosemary was the type of character and the type of professional wrestler that Impact Wrestling should build the Knockouts World title main event scene around. And it is truly an injustice that she isn't the Knockouts World Champion, that she hasn't been the Knockouts World Champion in a very, very long time. But unfortunately, I don't see her walking out with the title at Rebellion because, like I said, it would be a much bigger disservice if you have Tasha Steelz lose the championship at Rebellion. even if it is to Rosemary. But Rosemary, like I said, one of the most intriguing characters that Impact Wrestling has ever had to offer. She can take the loss. As much as it pains me to say this, Rosemary has to lose, and Tasha Steelz needs to keep getting momentum as a top main eventer in Impact Wrestling. So I'm going to give it to Tasha Steelz. We have ourselves a singles match for the AAA Reina de Reinas Championship, and I said that in an American accent, but it is the AAA Reina de Reinas Championship, where the virtuosa Deonna Purrazzo faces off against a returning Taya Valkyrie. Now, you want to talk about Rosemary? You want to talk about girls or superstars that you can build divisions around? Look no further than these two women. Deonna Purrazzo has been on top of Impact Wrestling's Knockout roster ever since she made her debut for the company. Now, she's not the Impact Knockouts champion right now, because that would be too repetitive in Impact Wrestling's booking manner. But she is still very much in the main event position. She is still very much in the limelight of Impact Wrestling's Knockout division. But I think La Güera Loca, Taya Valkyrie, is back for a reason, and she's back to take that championship over to Mexico and to truly reestablish herself as a top player in Impact Knockouts division. So Taya Valkyrie beats Deonna Purrazzo, and we start to get a very, very recurring series of matches, great matches between these two opponents very, very soon, which everyone should be looking forward to. Then we got ourselves the Impact World Tag Team Championships on the line. Violent by Design, Eric Young, Diener, and Joe Doring. Any combination of these two men can defend these titles at Rebellion in a 8-team elimination challenge. Now, I don't know which teams might be involved. You might have the Bullet Club, the Good Brothers. As far as I know, the Briscoes are going to make an appearance. They might come out with the World Tag Team Championships. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But Impact TV currently has been really focused on Matt Cardona and Chelsea Green and Brian Myers. So I'm going to make this short, simple, and to the point. The major players and Brian Myers and Matt Cardona are going to be your brand new World Tag Team Champions. And then you're going to have the brand new babyfaces coming into Impact Wrestling and the Briscoes chasing them for the Tag Team Championships. It's either that or the Motor City Machine Guns make a return and actually become the faces of the tag division chasing the champions. So with that said, let's get into our main event for the Rebellion pay-per-view. A main event that I could not be more happy about, because we finally get the match, the rematch, the actual match between Moose and Josh Alexander for the Impact World Championship. I've said it here. This rivalry has grown and built up over the past few months. I mean, we're at the tail end of April. This is something that began at the tail end of October. What Moose did and has done to Josh Alexander's family, not to mention his wrestling career, puts this rivalry and this feud and this championship main event match above everything else. So do I think we're going to have ourselves a new Impact World Champion, and do I think we should have ourselves a new Impact World Champion at Rebellion? There's no doubt about that. Josh Alexander needs to walk out of this show the Impact World Champion. Not because it's time for Moose's title reign to end, but because that is the type of story that Impact Wrestling is telling. And you can call it predictable or all you want, but sometimes you gotta give the people what they want, and you gotta be predictable in your storytelling, because it's the right thing to do. And if you don't, you book yourselves into a corner. So, if after this Saturday night, Josh Alexander isn't the Impact World Champion, I'm going to be hella surprised, and I'm going to be expecting something else to have happened, something big to have happened. because there are currently nowhere in the main roster that has a big enough babyface to challenge Moose after this. Heels, we do have some heels that can take up Josh Alexander after he wins the World Championship. But like I said, the walking weapon walks out Impact World Champion from Rebellion in a very heated brawl, very bloody main event match in New York City. So with that said, those are my predictions for the upcoming Rebellion pay-per-view in Impact Wrestling. We'll just see what happens. We have that to look forward to. We have Rampage and we have SmackDown later on tonight. So with that said, leave your thoughts, comments, and predictions on the pay-per-view coming up this Saturday night on the comment section below. That's it for today's edition of Wrestling Talk on this Friday, 22nd of 2022 of April 2022. I've been Alexis Carrillo. It's been a pleasure to be back here on this show discussing wrestling with all of you wrestling fans, and like always, I'll see you next time.